My name is Sofia Martinez and I am 28 years old. Last Thanksgiving, my mother called me an idiot in front of the entire family and banned me from ever returning to her house. What she did not know was that I had been secretly paying all her bills for 3 years. The moment I walked out that door, I made a decision that would shatter everything she thought she knew about control and family loyalty. Within 72 hours, her world completely collapsed and mine finally began. Before we dive into this family revenge story that changed everything, I want to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below and smash that like button if you have ever felt completely undervalued by your own family. Subscribe for more incredible stories of justice served, because what happens next will show you exactly how karma works when someone pushes the wrong person too far. Trust me, you will want to see how this explosive family drama unfolds. Growing up as the middle child in the Martinez household meant being invisible until someone needed something. My older brother Derek was the golden child who could do no wrong despite dropping out of college twice and moving back home at 32. My younger sister Emma was the baby who received endless sympathy and financial support for her artistic pursuits that never seemed to produce any actual art or income. Then there was me, Sofia Martinez, the responsible one who graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance, landed a 6-figure job at 25, and somehow became the family bank without anyone ever acknowledging it. My mother, Patricia Martinez, had mastered the art of emotional manipulation disguised as maternal love. She would call me crying about the electricity bill, sobbing about how she might lose the house, painting vivid pictures of herself freezing in the dark because Social Security barely covered groceries. The first time I paid her electric bill, I thought it was a temporary solution. She promised to pay me back within the month. That was 3 years ago. What started as a $200 emergency became a monthly expectation that grew into something monstrous. Electric bills became water bills, which became mortgage payments, which became car repairs, which became credit card minimums she could not meet because she kept shopping for things she did not need. Every month the amount increased. Every month the gratitude decreased. What began as tearful thank you calls evolved into entitled demands, delivered with the emotional manipulation of a seasoned professional. She would start conversations with guilt trips about how hard her life was, transition into subtle reminders about how successful I had become, and conclude with detailed explanations of why her financial crisis was somehow more urgent than my own financial goals. Derek contributed nothing, despite living in her basement rent-free and working sporadically as a freelance graphic designer. His main contribution to the household involved eating her food, using her utilities, and bringing home different girlfriends who would inevitably discover his lack of ambition and disappear within months. When confronted about contributing to household expenses, he would shrug and say he was between projects or waiting for the right opportunity. Emma, meanwhile, had turned emotional manipulation into performance art. She lived in an expensive downtown apartment that I also secretly subsidized, pursuing a career in social media, influencing that consisted mainly of posting pictures of overpriced coffee and complaining about how difficult it was to build a following. Her contribution to family finances involved asking for more money to invest in content creation, equipment, and networking opportunities that never seemed to generate any actual income. The worst part was not the money itself, though watching $3,600 leave my account every month while they complained about their struggles was deeply frustrating. The worst part was the complete lack of acknowledgement or respect. I was treated like an ATM with emotions expected to provide financial solutions while being excluded from family decisions, criticized for my lifestyle choices, and dismissed whenever I attempted to establish boundaries. My mother had developed a particularly cruel habit of commenting on my single status, my work schedule, and my decision to live in what she called an overpriced apartment instead of moving back home like Derek. She would make snide remarks about how I had forgotten my family because I worked long hours and could not attend every birthday party, graduation, or random family gathering she organized. The irony was suffocating. I was funding their entire lifestyle while being criticized for working too much to provide that funding. The financial arrangement had created a twisted dynamic where my success became ammunition for their resentment. They simultaneously depended on my income while resenting my achievements. My mother would brag to her friends about my career when it served her purposes, then criticize my priorities when I could not drop everything to solve their latest crisis. Derek would ask me for investment advice while mocking my corporate lifestyle, and Emma would request money for her creative dreams while posting social media content about how families should support each other unconditionally. I kept detailed records of every payment, every conversation, every promise to pay me back that never materialized. My spreadsheet showed a total of $129,600 over 36 months. That number represented more than just money. It represented my retirement contributions, my vacation fund, my emergency savings, and my dreams of homeownership. I had sacrificed my financial security to enable their irresponsible choices while receiving nothing but criticism in return. The psychological toll was becoming unbearable. I found myself dreading family phone calls, avoiding family gatherings, and feeling increasingly isolated from the people who were supposed to love and support me. My friends noticed the change in my behavior, my therapist encouraged me to establish boundaries, and my financial advisor expressed concern about my spending patterns. Everyone in my life could see what I was too emotionally entangled to recognize. I was being used, manipulated, and taken advantage of by the people who claimed to love me most. Thanksgiving morning started, like every other family gathering, with my mother calling to remind me to bring something expensive and time-consuming while simultaneously criticizing my choice before I even made it. This year, she demanded I prepare her famous sweet potato casserole because nobody makes it right except family, then immediately questioned whether I would have time to do it properly given my hectic work schedule. I spent 4 hours that morning preparing not just the sweet potato casserole but also homemade cranberry sauce and pumpkin bread because I knew she would find something to complain about if I arrived with just one dish. I also stopped at the expensive wine shop she loved to pick up 2 bottles of the Pinot Noir she had mentioned wanting to try but could never afford. The total cost of my contribution was nearly $300, not including the time and effort I invested in making everything from scratch. When I arrived at the house I had been secretly paying the mortgage on for 18 months, the scene was exactly what I expected. Derek was sprawled on the couch playing video games, surrounded by empty beer bottles and takeout containers. Emma was setting up a ring light in the dining room to film content about authentic family traditions while complaining about how the natural lighting was ruining her aesthetic. My mother was orchestrating the chaos like a conductor leading a symphony of dysfunction, barking orders at everyone while doing very little actual work herself. The first sign of trouble came when she inspected my sweet potato casserole and announced that it looked different from how she made it. When I explained that I had used organic sweet potatoes and real vanilla extract instead of artificial flavoring, she launched into a lecture about how I was showing off and trying to make her look bad with my fancy ingredients. This criticism was delivered in front of my aunt and uncle, who had driven 6 hours to be there, making the humiliation even more pointed and deliberate. Throughout dinner preparation, the passive-aggressive comments continued. She criticized the wine I brought as too sophisticated for a family gathering, questioned why I had worn a nice dress, instead of something more casual and family-oriented, and made pointed remarks about how I seemed disconnected from family traditions. Each comment was delivered with a smile and followed by, "But, you know I love you," as if affection could neutralize the constant stream of criticism and judgment. The explosion happened during dinner when my uncle asked about my recent promotion. I had been promoted to senior financial analyst with a significant salary increase, and I was proud of the achievement. As I began explaining the new responsibilities and opportunities, my mother interrupted with what she clearly thought was a hilarious joke. "Well, somebody has to be successful in this family, since the rest of us are apparently too stupid to figure out money like Miss Perfect over here." The table fell silent. My aunt looked uncomfortable, my uncle stopped eating, and even Derek looked up from his phone. But my mother was not finished. She continued with increasing volume and venom, explaining how I thought I was so much smarter than everyone else, and how I had forgotten where I came from, now that I had some fancy job. She accused me of being condescending, self-centered, and ashamed of my family. Then came the words that changed everything. You know what, Sophia? You are an idiot if you think success makes you better than the people who raised you. You have forgotten what family means, and frankly, I do not think you belong at this table anymore. You are banned from Thanksgiving and any other family gathering until you remember that family is more important than money. The irony was so thick, it was suffocating. She was calling me an idiot while sitting in a house I was paying for, eating food I had prepared, drinking wine I had purchased after years of taking my money, while showing me nothing but disrespect. The woman who had manipulated me into funding her lifestyle was now claiming I cared too much about money and not enough about family. I stood up slowly, my hands surprisingly steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. The entire table was staring at me, waiting to see how I would respond to being publicly humiliated and banished from my own family. Emma had her phone out, probably recording for social media content about family drama. Derek was smirking like he was watching entertainment instead of his sister being emotionally destroyed. "You know what, Mom?" I said, my voice calm and clear. "You are absolutely right. I have forgotten what family means. Real family does not use each other. Real family does not take and take while giving nothing back. Real family does not humiliate each other in front of relatives. You want me to remember what family means? I will remember. I will remember every single thing you have taught me about how family should not treat each other." I picked up my purse, left my coat, because I never wanted to return for it, and walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear my mother yelling about how I was proving her point and how I was choosing money over family by leaving instead of apologizing. She had no idea that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. As I sat in my car outside the house, my hands were shaking with adrenaline and 3 years of suppressed anger. I pulled out my phone and began making a list of every bill I had been paying, every account I had access to, and every financial arrangement that was about to change. My mother wanted to know what family meant. She was about to learn exactly what it meant when the family ATM decided to close permanently. The drive home from that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner was a blur of rage, clarity, and determination. For the first time in 3 years, I felt completely free from the emotional manipulation that had controlled my financial decisions. My mother had given me the perfect excuse to do what I should have done months ago, cut off the money train that had been enabling their dysfunction and disrespect. Friday morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I had not felt in years. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began the systematic process of dismantling the financial web I had woven around my family. My first stop was the spreadsheet where I had meticulously tracked every payment, every promise, and every broken commitment. The numbers were staggering when viewed all together: $129,600 over 36 months, with not a single payment returned despite countless promises. I started with the utilities. My mother's electric, water, and gas bills were all set up for automatic payment from my checking account. 3 quick phone calls to customer service representatives, and all automatic payments were canceled, effective immediately. When they asked if I wanted to transfer the accounts to the primary account holder, I politely declined and requested that all future bills be sent directly to Patricia Martinez at her address. Next came the mortgage payment. 18 months ago, when my mother had called sobbing about foreclosure proceedings, I had contacted her lender and arranged to make the payments directly. The mortgage company was surprisingly accommodating when I explained that I would no longer be making payments on someone else's behalf. They noted my request and confirmed that Patricia Martinez would be responsible for all future payments, with the next payment due in 5 days. The car payment was more complicated because my name was on the loan as a co-signer. This had happened 2 years ago when my mother needed a reliable vehicle and her credit was too poor to qualify a loan. I had co-signed, thinking it would be temporary, that she would refinance in her own name once her credit improved. Instead, she had made exactly 4 payments before defaulting to me completely. I could not remove myself from the loan, but I could stop making payments and let the natural consequences unfold. Emma's apartment was the most satisfying cancellation. 6 months ago, when she had claimed she was about to be evicted because her social media career was taking time to build momentum, I had agreed to help with rent just until she got established. I had been paying $1,400 monthly for an apartment I had never even seen because she was embarrassed by her family helping out. The leasing office was professional and understanding when I explained that I would no longer be making payments on behalf of Emma Martinez. By noon Friday, I had canceled or modified 17 different automatic payments, subscription services, and financial arrangements. The final step was closing the credit card I had given my mother for emergencies only that had somehow accumulated $8,000 in charges for restaurants, shopping, and entertainment. The credit card company froze the account immediately and scheduled a replacement card to be sent to my address only. As I worked through each cancellation, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders that I had not realized I was carrying. Every phone call was a step toward financial freedom. Every canceled payment was a reclamation of my own priorities and goals. For 3 years, I had been living paycheck to paycheck, despite earning a substantial salary, because I was supporting 4 adults instead of 1. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. Without the constant drain of supporting my family's irresponsible financial choices, my monthly budget suddenly included $3,600 that I could allocate toward my own goals. I could rebuild my emergency fund, increase my retirement contributions, start saving for a house down payment, and maybe even plan a vacation that did not involve feeling guilty about spending money on myself. But the emotional satisfaction went deeper than financial relief. For the first time in years, I was making decisions based on my own values and priorities, instead of emotional manipulation and guilt trips. I was choosing to invest in my own future, instead of enabling behavior that was harmful to everyone involved. My mother, Derek, and Emma had been insulated from the natural consequences of their financial irresponsibility because I had been absorbing all the impact. Saturday morning brought the first sign that my strategic dismantling was having an effect. My phone rang at 7 a.m. with my mother's number on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. The message was predictably dramatic. She was calling to give me a chance to apologize for my inappropriate behavior on Thanksgiving and to discuss getting past this silly disagreement. There was no acknowledgement of her own behavior, no recognition of how she had treated me, and certainly no apology for publicly humiliating me in front of family. The second call came at 10 a.m., then another at noon, then 2 more in the afternoon. By Sunday evening, I had received 14 missed calls and 6 increasingly frantic voicemails. The tone shifted from condescending disappointment to confused frustration to barely controlled panic as the first bills began arriving with past due notices and payment reminders. Emma's contribution to the crisis communication was a series of text messages that perfectly captured her self-absorbed worldview. Her first message complained that her living situation was being affected by family drama and demanded that I work things out with Mom like an adult. When I did not respond, she escalated to accusations that I was punishing innocent people and being vindictive over a stupid argument. The final message in the series was a barely coherent rant about how I was destroying the family and how she was telling everyone what kind of person you really are. Derek's approach was more direct. He left one voicemail that was equal parts threat and bargaining. He started by calling me petty and immature, then transitioned to explaining how my actions were hurting Mom, and concluded with a transparent attempt at manipulation about how families should stick together during difficult times. The subtext was clear. He was comfortable with me funding their lifestyle as long as he did not have to contribute anything himself. Sunday evening, I treated myself to an expensive dinner at the restaurant I had been wanting to try for months, but had never felt justified in spending money on. As I sat there enjoying wine that cost more than I had spent on myself in weeks, I felt something I had almost forgotten: genuine happiness that was not clouded by guilt, resentment, or financial stress. The irony was perfect. My mother had banned me from Thanksgiving dinner because she thought I cared too much about money and not enough about family. Now she was about to discover exactly how much I had been caring about family by sacrificing my own financial well-being for theirs. The lesson was going to be expensive, immediate, and impossible to ignore. As I drove home that evening, my phone buzzed with another call from my mother. I smiled and let it go to voicemail. The real fireworks were just beginning, and I was finally ready to watch the show from a safe distance. Monday morning arrived with the force of a financial tsunami hitting the Martinez household. I woke up to 17 missed calls and 12 text messages, all from family members who were suddenly discovering what independence actually cost. The panic in their voices was both predictable and deeply satisfying after years of being treated like an expendable resource. My mother's voicemails had evolved from angry demands to confused pleading overnight. Her Monday morning message was a masterpiece of cognitive dissonance. She wanted to know why the electric company was calling about a past due balance when she never handled those bills. The confusion in her voice was genuine because she had become so accustomed to me managing her responsibilities that she had forgotten they were originally hers. The water company had already sent a disconnection notice for Wednesday. The gas company scheduled a service interruption for Friday. Her mortgage lender had called twice about the missing payment that was now 6 days overdue. The perfect storm I had orchestrated was moving with the precision of a Swiss watch, and every element was designed to arrive simultaneously for maximum impact. Emma's crisis was unfolding on social media in real time, which added an element of public embarrassment that I had not anticipated but thoroughly enjoyed. Her Instagram stories showed her frantically calling apartment management, posting about unexpected housing challenges, and asking her followers for temporary housing recommendations. The irony of someone who made a living posting about authenticity, having to publicly admit that her lifestyle was completely fabricated, was absolutely delicious. Derek's response was the most predictable, because he immediately tried to position himself as the reasonable mediator who could fix everything. He called Tuesday morning with a proposal that perfectly demonstrated how little he understood about accountability or consequences. His plan involved me loaning them money to catch up on bills, while they worked out a payment plan to pay me back. He actually used the phrase fresh start as if 3 years of broken promises could be erased with good intentions. But the most revealing conversation came when my aunt called Tuesday evening. She had apparently received several calls from my mother about the family emergency and wanted to understand what was happening. As I explained the financial arrangement, I had been maintaining the 3-year history of broken promises and the Thanksgiving confrontation. The silence on her end was profound. "Sophia," she finally said, "I had no idea. Your mother told everyone that you were successful but selfish, that you never helped family despite having money. She has been collecting sympathy from relatives for months about how hard things were, while her own daughter ignored their struggles. The manipulation had been even more extensive than I realized. My mother had been playing victim to extended family, portraying me as the ungrateful daughter who had abandoned her responsibilities while she struggled alone. The narrative she had constructed painted her as the martyr and me as the villain, all while she was living off my income and resenting me for it." Wednesday brought the first real consequences. The electricity was disconnected at 2 in the afternoon. My mother called 4 times in 10 minutes, her voice escalating from disbelief to panic to rage. She demanded that I fix this immediately and accused me of trying to hurt an old woman with my childish revenge. The entitlement was staggering. Even facing disconnection of essential services, she felt justified in demanding that I solve problems she had created. Emma's apartment crisis reached its peak when she called crying about being served with an eviction notice. Her landlord was not interested in her promises or explanations. Rent was due and rent had not been paid. She alternated between begging me to loan her the money and accusing me of destroying her life over family drama. The cognitive dissonance was remarkable. She simultaneously acknowledged that I had been paying her rent while claiming I was wrong to stop. Derek's attempts at mediation became increasingly desperate as he realized that his comfortable living situation was also in jeopardy. Without electricity, water, or heat, the basement apartment he had been occupying rent-free was becoming uninhabitable. His conversations shifted from condescending lectures about family loyalty to barely disguised panic about where he would live if the house became completely unlivable. Thursday morning brought a breakthrough in the form of my mother's first genuine attempt at accountability. Her voicemail was different, quieter, more subdued, and containing something that sounded almost like remorse. She acknowledged that things had gotten out of hand and admitted that she might have been taking advantage of my generosity. She asked if we could talk like adults and work something out. But even her apology was manipulative. She framed the conversation as if we were equal participants in a misunderstanding rather than acknowledging the fundamental imbalance of our relationship. She wanted to negotiate a return to the previous arrangement with minor modifications, not address the underlying issues of respect, accountability, and boundaries. The water disconnection Friday morning eliminated any possibility of Derek continuing to live in the house. He called from a coffee shop, having spent the night at a friend's place, demanding that I stop this insanity and think about what I was doing to the family. His anger was pure projection. He was furious that his comfortable, responsibility-free lifestyle was ending, but he framed it as concern for family welfare. By Friday evening, I had received 73 phone calls, 42 text messages, and several visits to my apartment building from family members trying to force a confrontation. My building's security system was excellent, so they could not access my floor, but the desperation was escalating. They were discovering that emotional manipulation was powerless against automatic systems, disconnection notices, and eviction procedures. The most satisfying moment came when Emma posted a long social media rant about toxic family members who abandon people during difficult times. Her followers, who had been watching her lifestyle content for months, began asking pointed questions about how she afforded her apartment, her clothes, and her constant dining out. The house of cards was collapsing in public, and the influencer who had built her brand on authenticity was being exposed as completely inauthentic. Saturday morning, I finally answered when my mother called. Her voice was broken, defeated, and finally honest. The house was unlivable. Derek had moved out, Emma was staying with friends, and she was facing the reality of her financial situation for the first time in 3 years. She asked one simple question that contained more honesty than our previous 3 years of conversations combined. What do you want from me? What I wanted was simple acknowledgement, accountability, and authentic change. But what I got was a masterclass in how narcissistic personality disorders respond to consequences. My mother's initial honesty lasted exactly 24 hours before she regrouped and launched a counterattack designed to regain control through alternative manipulation strategies. Sunday afternoon brought the flying monkeys. My mother had spent the weekend making calls to every relative, family, friend, and church member she could think of, crafting a narrative that portrayed her as the victim of an ungrateful daughter's cruel abandonment. The calls started around noon. My cousin from Oregon, my godmother, my former high school teacher who somehow still had my number, and various family friends who felt qualified to lecture me about forgiveness and family loyalty. Each conversation followed the same script. They would start with concern for my mother's welfare, transition to disappointment in my behavior, and conclude with pressure to be the bigger person and restore the financial support that had been keeping her afloat. None of them had any interest in hearing about the 3 years of manipulation, the $129,000 I had provided, or the public humiliation I had endured. They only cared about restoring the status quo that benefited everyone except me. The most infuriating call came from my childhood pastor, who delivered a lecture about honoring your parents and Christian forgiveness while demonstrating zero curiosity about the circumstances that had led to this situation. He spoke about my mother's suffering and my obligation to show mercy, as if mercy meant accepting abuse indefinitely. When I tried to explain the financial exploitation, he dismissed it as worldly concerns that should not interfere with family relationships. Emma's social media campaign reached new heights of manipulation and self-pity. She posted carefully curated content about family abandonment and conditional love, while conveniently omitting any mention of the financial support she had been receiving. Her followers were eating up the victim narrative, sending supportive comments about cutting off toxic family members, without realizing she was describing herself as the victim of exactly the behavior she had been perpetrating. Derek surprised me by showing up at my office Tuesday afternoon. Building security called to ask if I wanted to meet with him, and curiosity got the better of my judgment. He looked like he had not slept in days, his usual cockiness replaced with something approaching desperation. His opening statement was pure Derek. He blamed me for overreacting and destroying the family over money issues that could have been worked out like adults. But as our conversation continued, cracks appeared in his facade. He admitted that he had maybe taken advantage a little of my generosity and that he should have contributed more to household expenses. He acknowledged that my mother sometimes said things she did not mean, and that Emma could be dramatic about money stuff. These were the first admissions of accountability I had heard from any family member. However, his proposed solution revealed that he still fundamentally misunderstood the situation. He wanted me to restore financial support in exchange for more appreciation and better communication. He offered to pay me back $50 monthly and promised that Emma would tone down her attitude. The audacity was breathtaking, he thought. The problem was poor customer service rather than fundamental exploitation. Wednesday brought the eviction notice for my mother's house. 18 months of missed mortgage payments could not be reversed overnight, and the foreclosure process was moving forward with bureaucratic inevitability. She called sobbing, begging me to contact the mortgage company and work something out because she had nowhere to go and could not survive on the streets. The manipulation was textbook. She painted vivid pictures of herself homeless and helpless, reminded me of how she had sacrificed everything to raise me, and claimed that my success was only possible because of her support and guidance. She promised to make changes and be more grateful if I would just restore the financial arrangement that had been sustaining her lifestyle. But the most revealing moment came when she accidentally let slip that she had been telling relatives I was having mental health issues and acting irrationally because of work stress. She had been building a narrative that my decision to establish boundaries was evidence of psychological instability, rather than a reasonable response to financial abuse. The gaslighting was so sophisticated that she probably believed her own version of events. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor, Emma standing outside my apartment building with 2 suitcases and red eyes from crying. She had been evicted that morning and had nowhere else to go. Her entire social media empire was crumbling because maintaining the illusion of success required money she did not have. Without my financial support, she could not afford the lifestyle that had been generating her content. Our conversation was the first honest communication we had shared in years. She admitted that she had been using me financially while resenting my success emotionally. She acknowledged that her social media career was mostly fake and that she had been living off my generosity while posting about independence and authenticity. She was facing the reality that her entire adult identity had been subsidized by the sister she had been dismissing and disrespecting. But even her honesty was manipulative. She framed her admission as opening up and being vulnerable, rather than taking accountability for 3 years of exploitation. She wanted credit for finally telling the truth, while simultaneously expecting me to reward that honesty by resuming financial support. She literally asked if she could crash at my place for a few weeks while she figured things out. Friday morning brought the final collapse. My mother called from a hotel, having spent her last $400 on 2 nights of accommodation while she waited for me to come to my senses and restore her financial security. Her voice was different, smaller, older, and finally devoid of the entitled anger that had characterized our relationship for so long. She asked one question that crystallized everything. How could you let this happen to your own mother? The victim mentality was so deeply ingrained that even facing homelessness, she could not acknowledge her role in creating the crisis. In her mind, I was responsible for solving problems I had not created, and my refusal to continue enabling dysfunction was a form of abandonment rather than healthy boundary setting. As I sat in my quiet apartment Friday evening, eating dinner I could afford because I was no longer supporting 4 adults, I felt something I had not experienced in 3 years: peace. The chaos swirling around my family was no longer my responsibility to manage or my crisis to solve. 6 months later, I was sitting in my therapist's office reflecting on the most transformative period of my adult life. The initial chaos of cutting off financial support had eventually settled into a new normal that looked nothing like the dysfunctional patterns I had been enabling for 3 years. My family had been forced to face reality, and the results were both predictable and surprisingly positive. My mother had initially moved into a government-subsidized senior apartment after exhausting her network of relatives willing to provide temporary housing. The transition was difficult and humbling, but it forced her to confront her actual financial situation for the first time in years. She had to apply for every assistance program she qualified for, learn to budget on her fixed income, and accept that her lifestyle would be dramatically different without my subsidies. The most surprising development was how quickly she adapted once the option of manipulating me was completely removed. Within 2 months, she had found a part-time job at a local library, started attending a senior center where she made new friends, and began taking classes on financial literacy. When external rescue was no longer available, she discovered internal resources she had not accessed in decades. Derek's journey was more complicated because his sense of entitlement ran deeper. He spent 2 months couch surfing and complaining about how I had destroyed the family before reality forced him to make actual changes. He eventually found a roommate situation with other men his age and got a full-time job at a marketing firm. The consistency of regular employment and shared responsibility transformed his attitude in ways I had never thought possible. Emma's transformation was the most dramatic and genuine. Losing her apartment and her artificial lifestyle forced her to confront the emptiness of her social media persona. She moved back to our hometown, got a job at a nonprofit organization, and started creating content about authentic living and financial responsibility. Her follower count dropped dramatically, but her engagement improved because she was finally being honest about her experiences. The extended family drama gradually faded as the truth emerged. My aunt became one of my strongest supporters once she understood the full scope of what had been happening. Several relatives who had initially criticized my decision eventually apologized when they realized how thoroughly they had been manipulated. The family narrative shifted from Sophia abandoned her struggling mother to Sophia set necessary boundaries after years of exploitation. My own life underwent a revolution that extended far beyond financial relief. Without the constant drain of supporting my family's dysfunction, I was able to focus on my own goals and relationships. I increased my retirement contributions, built a substantial emergency fund, and made a down payment on a beautiful condo that reflected my actual taste rather than whatever was left after everyone else's needs were met. More importantly, I discovered what healthy relationships actually looked like. I joined a hiking group where I met people who appreciated my company without expecting financial contributions. I started dating someone who was genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings rather than my earning potential. I built friendships based on mutual respect and reciprocity rather than one-sided obligation and guilt. The psychological changes were even more significant than the practical improvements. 3 years of therapy helped me understand how childhood patterns had primed me for exploitation and taught me to recognize manipulation tactics before they could take root. I learned to trust my own perceptions, set boundaries without guilt, and prioritize my own well-being without feeling selfish. My relationship with my family slowly evolved into something healthier, but fundamentally different. My mother and I eventually rebuilt a connection based on honesty rather than financial dependence. She apologized for the years of manipulation and acknowledged how her behavior had damaged our relationship. Our conversations became genuine exchanges rather than elaborate setups for requests. Derek and I developed a cordial but distant relationship. He never fully accepted responsibility for his role in the dysfunction, but he stopped expecting me to solve his problems. We could share a meal and conversation without him asking for money or criticizing my choices. The relationship was superficial but peaceful. Emma and I became genuinely close for the first time since childhood. Her transformation was so complete that she often seemed like a different person. She had learned to take responsibility for her choices, appreciate what she had, and build authentic connections. Our relationship was now based on mutual respect and genuine affection. The most valuable lesson I learned was that enabling dysfunction is not love, and setting boundaries is not abandonment. Real love sometimes requires allowing people to face the natural consequences of their choices, even when those consequences are painful. My family's growth only became possible when I stopped shielding them from reality. Looking back, I realized that the Thanksgiving confrontation was the best thing that ever happened to our family. My mother's cruel words and public humiliation gave me permission to do what I had needed to do for years, prioritize my own well-being, and stop enabling behavior that was harmful to everyone involved. Her attempt to shame me into submission became the catalyst for genuine transformation. The financial records I had kept became evidence of my own strength and generosity rather than documentation of exploitation. $129,000 represented not just money I had given, but proof that I had tried everything possible to help my family, before finally accepting that help without accountability is just enablement. Today, my life reflects my actual values rather than my family's expectations. I invest in relationships that enrich my life, pursue goals that align with my priorities, and maintain boundaries that protect my well-being. The peace I feel now reminds me daily that I made the right choice, even when it was the hardest choice. Have you ever had to choose between enabling someone you love and protecting your own well-being? What would you do if your family took your generosity for granted and treated you like their personal bank account? I want to hear about your experiences with family dynamics and setting boundaries in the comments below. Hit that like button if this story resonated with your own struggles with difficult family relationships, and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in impossible situations. Share this video with anyone who might be struggling with similar family exploitation, because sometimes we all need permission to put ourselves first. Thank you for joining me on this journey of learning that real family supports each other rather than using each other. Remember that you deserve relationships built on respect and reciprocity, and sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable destructive behavior. Until next time, choose yourself.